Mel B, former Spice Girl, baby mama at Eddie Murphy, and current X Factor judge, is under investigation for witness tampering. And based on the facts as we know them at the recording of this podcast, she could do some very serious jail time. By now you know the story. Mel B was married to Stephen Belafonte, not his real name, right? Socialite, playboy Stephen Belafonte.
Steve Stansbury.
Steve Stansbury.
But that didn't have quite the ring he wanted.
So he just, unofficially changed his name to Belafonte and went around as Belafonte.
Who doesn't want to invoke Harry Belafonte to Deo?
Goodness.
That's the Banana Boat song. Come on.
Anyway, Mel B and Belafonte have a child together, and during the divorce in 2017, Mel B leveled some allegations against Belafonte that were really of some horrific, both physical and mental abuse. Repeatedly beating her, knocking her teeth out, locking her away, forcing her into videotaped sex acts with the couple's nanny, both together, Belafonte and Mel B, and the nanny, and then individually between Mel B and the nanny. In addition to many other really unspeakable acts of physical and psychological terror. The case has proceeded to the divorce trial, but recently it's come up. Two women have come forward, one a rapper by the name of Saya, and the other a 22-year-old Swedish girl, who have claimed to have very intimate knowledge of the couple and, in the latter case, engaged in long sexual activity with both of them for a long period of time. And both of them have come forward to say that Mel B in recent days has cajoled them or threatened them into providing false testimony in her divorce proceedings with Stephen Belafonte. All of this has made a shambles of the couple's divorce proceedings, has really given voice to Belafonte's claims he's been making all along that these allegations by Mel B were either made up or severely exaggerated. And they have opened up the very real possibility that Mel B could end up doing some serious jail time in this case. I'm Jason Beckerman.
And I'm Derek Kaufman.
And this is Behind the Bar. Derek, tell us about the two women who have recently come forward and what it is they had to say about Mel B.
Yeah, before we jump into that, I do want to say that Mel B has been pretty unscathed by all of this until this juncture. Most of the press that we've done on the case has been anti-Stephen Belafonte. He seemed like this monster that you described, who was physically and emotionally abusing her, stealing money for sham businesses and the like. And this is really where we're learning maybe allegations of the darker side of Mel B in this whole thing, and it's been interesting, hasn't it?
It has been interesting. In my mind, from my perspective, it has been a complete reversal of what I thought about that. I shouldn't say reversal. I still think Stephen Belafonte is probably a pretty bad dude.
Yeah, I'd say on balance, I still don't like Stephen Belafonte.
Yeah, but what these allegations, she is trying to influence the testimony of these people because they're all denying what she says happened, and she wants to cajole them and threaten them into testifying in her favor. It seems odd. Tell us what they said.
Yeah, this is nasty stuff. So the first one is this rapper Saya. She's sort of aspiring rapper, somewhat known in the hip-hop community. She says that she's very intimately familiar with Stephen and Mel B's relationship. She was friendly with them for a long period of time. She's seen them out. She's seen their relationship behind closed doors, and she was going to testify that there was no abuse here. Mel B never complained to me about any abuse. Stephen never did anything untoward in my presence. And this was going to be strong testimony as sort of a character witness for Stephen at the trial. And it was going to really undermine a lot of what Mel B has said to this point.
Just to reiterate what you said, she knows this couple very well, and she would have been in the position to have seen these acts, she says, or at least heard from Mel B. They have the kind of relationship she would have heard it from Mel B had they been true, had these allegations of abuse been true, and she never heard a peep.
That's right. She says she never heard a peep. Now, granted, she didn't live with them. She's not someone who knows everything that goes on in the relationship, but this would have really undercut a lot of the picture that Mel B was trying to paint of all these incidents of abuse. Remember, she said she would have to go to the X Factor tapings with makeup on to cover bruises, and this woman was going to come in there and say, never anything of the sort. So this was going to really undermine her case. And so she went to the police department. She said, I've got all these text messages, and it looks like Mel B is threatening me to either try to convince me to falsely testify or not testify in Stephen's behalf. And this is a big-time celebrity intimidating a smaller-time celebrity. So she went to the police station, filed a report, and they opened up an investigation into witness tampering.
Right. And so bad enough you have one person who could be explained away. You know, women who are the victims of abuse often don't want to tell their friends about it, and often will even cover it up from the closest associates because it can be embarrassing or whatever it might be. as you know, as much as we think that people should be able to come forward, it's harder, easier said than done. So we have one person, but then a second witness has come forward with similar accusations against Mel B.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the next witness is a 22-year-old Swedish nanny type figure. So not Lorraine Giles. So most of the news has been about the nanny who Stephen and Mel had threesomes with, and Mel B has admitted all of this. She said that they did have a sexual relationship, but that Stephen was the one who was sort of the heavy hand trying to record the relationship, would have separate sexual acts with the nanny without Mel B.
And allegedly threatened Mel B that if she did not continue in these relationships and continue to do other things he wanted her to do, he was going to release the tapes that he had of Mel B having sex with Lorraine Giles,
which are apparently in a public storage unit somewhere. There's been lots of fights over who has access to the storage unit, whether Lorraine and Stephen have been teaming up against her and so forth.
All right, so now we have this 22-year-old Swede come forward, another nanny, maybe not to their kids, not quite sure, but in any event, she also engaged in sexual activity with both Stephen and Mel B at whatever time.
That's right, and according to this report, she said that Mel was trying to cajole her and sort of badger her into falsely testifying that Stephen had raped her during some of these sexual trysts, and that the sex was not always consensual, and she wanted her to come on the stage or sort of come on the stand at the trial and testify to this monstrous picture of Stephen Belafonte as a sexual aggressor and predator type figure.
And to compound things, she said that when she said to Mel B, that's not true, he never did rape me.
Yeah, she said the sex was always respectful, I believe was the word she used.
Respectful. That Mel B came back out very angry and really tried to strong-arm her into giving this false testimony.
Yeah, some of the allegations are of an American sort of big-timing a foreigner. She was saying things like, look, this is our court system, you're going to have to come in and testify in this way. And if these allegations are true, it does seem like someone playing intimidation tactics towards a lesser opponent, and this could create what you said was now we've got a pattern here potentially. We don't have just one allegation by Saya; we have two people, and that could really lend a lot of credence to each allegation.
It lends credence to the allegations, number one, and number two, it could really open up considerable jail time for Mel B. Talk with us a little bit about the law of witness tampering.
Yeah, so there's a witness tampering law. It's under the Penal Code 136.1. There's a witness tampering offense, and under the law, here's what you have to prove. You got to prove that the person knowingly and maliciously, so both knowingly and maliciously, prevented or dissuaded a potential witness or a victim of a crime from testifying or reporting that crime. Do we have those elements here, Jason? This could be a very, very serious offense. There's some misdemeanor versions, but we have two separate people making these allegations. Do they meet these criteria?
I would think that they would. I mean, we have to see the text messages, and we have to hear the exact testimony from the 22-year-old Swedish girl. We don't have her name. I wish there was some other way to indicate her. But we have to see what exactly it is the allegations are. But it does seem that she was using effort, cajoling and threats of physical force, according to Saya, to stop them from testifying or to get them to testify falsely. And I think that probably meets the elements of the offense and could lend to, at least if it was just one, we talked about this earlier, just one person, a misdemeanor count. But two, you're talking, I think you could probably have circumstances that make it a felony.
I think that's right. And we don't just have, according to the allegations, at least with Sia, there's text messages to this effect. So if Sia came to the police station and said, Mel B, I saw her in the street and she made these threats, you might have a he said, she said type situation where there'd be a credibility determination. Mel B has a pretty clean record. I'm not sure that Saya would be able to successfully demonstrate that Mel B had made these threats without any third-party witnesses. But if there's text messages, there's real communication that's iron and that is sort of concrete evidence. I think they might have a better case here.
They do, and it also gives a lot of credence to the Swedish woman's testimony because it seems very consistent with the written allegations, the allegations within the text messages themselves. And that kind of evidence is what juries look for, right? It's not just he said, she, or in this case, she said, she said. It's actually written communications from one person to another that seem to be born of anger, and things that are born of anger can really bespeak the truth about how someone feels. And, I really do think that Mel B, in addition to opening herself up to this liability for witness tampering, has really undermined her case against Belafonte. I don't see how she then gets up and, testifies in a way that a jury's going to believe her. I think Belafonte's lawyers are going to annihilate her on the stand for having sort of cajoled these people into testifying.
I think you're right. I mean, even if this doesn't rise to the level of a serious crime where she's going to do prison time, I lay some of the blame here. She's well represented by able legal counsel. And, I don't know the names of all the lawyers, but, you got to keep control of your client. You got to tell them that we're going to battle this out in court. None of these extracurriculars should be advanced out there. You shouldn't be talking to witnesses. And really, if she's off doing this on her own against her lawyer's wishes, that's one thing. But if she's really counseled effectively, you wouldn't want your client doing this.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
By the way, my favorite all-time witness tampering case is Buddy Ciancia, who was I believe the mayor of Providence, Rhode Island. Do you know what the scandal was that he got involved in?
Buddy Cianci, that's the name on a Family Guy reference. I didn't know that was a real person.
Yeah,
They were like Buddy Cianci High School.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, I don't know that case.
Operation Plunderdome.
Oh, nice.
Of all people would love that.
Yeah.
It was racketeering and corruption charges, typical sort of
Mad Maxian. I like that.
Typical kind of New England kind of rogue politics, and he was allegedly sort of forcing or cajoling witnesses out of testifying.
How is that not more well known? That's a much better term than Watergate.
Yeah, this was back in the early 2000s. I remember Buddy Cianci. I remember witness tampering charges. I remember the fraud charges. I believe he was convicted and did some time, old Buddy.
Wow, beyond Plunderdome.
Yeah, the one person you don't want to be Mel B is Buddy Cianci.
Yeah, absolutely.
So putting Buddy Cianci aside, what are we talking about here? What's Mel B going to say in her defense here? Because I do think she has some pretty good defenses to these claims.
Yeah, now maybe Mel B, one type of defense is you can play dumb. As with all criminal offenses, you need a guilty state of mind. And maybe she could say, I wasn't intending to intimidate them. I simply wanted to talk to these witnesses to get an idea of how they were going to testify, but it certainly wasn't my intent to threaten them any harm. I was just sort of trying to prepare for my trial. And you could maybe make some headway on this in a criminal context, because you do have to be knowingly trying to intimidate the witness or coerce them into some sort of false testimony, and do so maliciously. Those are pretty high bars under the law.
Absolutely. And, the thing about Mel B's, even the alleged threats against Saya, they were somewhat vague. She didn't say, if you testify against me or in favor of Belafonte, I will harm you. It just said, beware. It was sort of like, don't cross me, beware, things might happen. And so it's a little bit vague. And in the hands of a good lawyer, what they could say is, like, what she was saying is that it's going to upset your life, it's going to upset my life, you're going to injure my children, you'll be giving false testimony, and you don't want to be put on trial for perjury. There's lots of different ways that could be read. There's what makes the most sense, which is not always the way the juries, will go, because you do need to prove, in order to prove witness tampering, like any other crime, you need to show beyond a reasonable doubt, which is really where I think that in the divorce proceedings, it could be more useful for Belafonte than in a criminal proceeding against Mel B, because obviously in the divorce proceeding, you don't need to show something beyond a reasonable doubt. What you need to do is present evidence to a jury that contradict Mel B's testimony, and I think it could be used for that purpose.
Yeah, and you got to remember also that Mel B is pretty squeaky clean from a legal perspective, other than these allegations. And that's going to, even though you're not supposed to take that into account when you're assessing someone's guilt or innocence on a particular charge, the jury will have that in the back of their mind, that this is not some mafioso type person. This is a Spice Girl. This is Scary Spice. She hasn't done anything but have Eddie Murphy's baby and be an X Factor judge. She's not someone who they're going to necessarily believe did these types of things, even though you have two people who knows the credibility of Saya, and no one knows the Swedish nanny. So this is going to be something where I think it's going to, on balance, people are going to be inclined to believe someone like Mel B, who hasn't led a sort of criminal life.
Just as an aside, and I didn't want to bring this up too early because I don't want to make light of the situation. It's very serious, obviously, the allegations of domestic abuse and all the other awful things. But did you, in preparing for this podcast, I went back and looked at Mel B's resume, and both in her personal life and her professional life, it is something. I mean, obviously, we all know that she got to start with as one of the Spice Girls, and we talked a little bit earlier. She's, at the time, maybe wasn't, but now is easily the second most famous Spice Girl after Posh, right?
Yeah, I think she's well ahead of Sporty.
But she had a huge #1 hit in UK charts with Missy Elliott. She had her own single career. She dated Eddie Murphy, had one or two children with Eddie.
Had one kid with Eddie.
One kid with Eddie Murphy. She is, and now has been a judge on the X Factor. She accuses Belafonte of spending £50 million, so about $60-70 million of her money that she made just from the Spice Girls. That's seriously the kind of money she, as one of the 5 Spice Girls, made.
The Spice Girls generated gobs of money.
Yeah,
I didn't
remember that. As a judge on X Factor, I don't know what she earns, but it's got to be multi-millions of dollars every year. She has had a remarkable both professional career and, you know, personal life as well, having dated sort of, you know, these big time stars.
Yeah, it's caused you to sort of really remember how big the Spice Girls was and how big her career was after that. You're right. She had these solo hits. I know most of her solo hits as by other artists, like I Want You Back was a solo hit that I know as a Jackson 5 song, and For Once in My Life, which is a solo song I know by, Stevie Wonder?
Let me ask
anyway,
you,
they're her hits too.
If you had to guess what the gross box office for the Spice Girls movie was, what would you think?
Oh, for the movie, I would say it did 150 million.
100 million. Not as good as I would have thought.
No,
Yeah.
they were such a huge phenomenon. But I remember that was after the wave had crested. They sort of didn't capitalize at the peak of their fame.
We can all agree that Meatloaf was the most impressive thing about the Spice Girls movie, right?
I would agree.
What's
that
sound?
All right, mail time. Remember to write in your questions and comments to behindthebar@tmz.com. First one up is from Tim. I don't know if you guys follow YouTubers too much, but I remember you did a past episode on PewDiePie. Recently, he said the N-word during a live stream on YouTube and obviously is receiving a large amount of backlash. YouTube has community guidelines in place for all of its creators, and I was wondering if something like this could be the final straw in getting him permanently banned from the platform.
It's a really good question. We do follow YouTubers, and we're obviously familiar with PewDiePie. I think almost everybody is. But yeah, I guess he was playing this game called PlayerUnknown's Battleground, and during some fight scene, he screamed out, you know, what these effing N-words. And you know, PewDiePie is sort of known for this kind of thing, right? He can be on the edge. He uses a lot of difficult language, but I think his true followers probably don't mind very much. Although, what do the social networking sites and the YouTube platforms of the world do about this?
Yeah, look, there are terms of use. When you get on a Twitter or a YouTube, you're signing up to use their platform according to their rules and guidelines. And one of the rules and guidelines on all of these social media platforms is that you can't use what they call abusive language. And when you use the N-word, and he was previously accused of making vaguely anti-Semitic remarks, he has run afoul of this, but I don't think he's going to be kicked off the platform.
I mean, this is like Tom Brady. This is like Tom Brady deflating balls. You're only going to punish this guy so much. He is the cash cow for these sites, and they would never go after him. And if they did, he would just open up shop somewhere else and bring his tens of millions of loyal followers, hundreds of millions of loyal followers with him. I just think that this is a difficult situation for different sites to have to deal with. YouTube in this case, but other sites have to deal with this kind of thing all the time. But there's no way they're walking away from this kind of money because of what this guy said. Now,
a separate issue, though, is if he has any sponsorships. And the way that YouTube is making money is they're getting a portion of the revenue every time he generates money, right? So they get a cut of that. So he's their cash cow in certain respects. But if they're unable to sell ads against his programming because he becomes so far over the line in his use of coarse language, then I think it could sort of catch up with him a little bit.
I mean, there are two ways that ads go into YouTube. Number one, there can be direct sales campaigns where the people who sell his show are actually going to specific advertisers, ad agencies, and getting specific buys for his properties. The other way is just through this indirect advertising, where you just take from the pool of advertisers. The direct people are more easy to get to because consumers can come forward and say, look, we're not going to buy your product if you continue to advertise. If you're talking about the indirect people, it's a little bit about indirect advertisers can certainly identify sites they don't want to be associated with, but it's sort of more amorphous, though, the relationship between the talent and the advertiser in that case. And I really don't see much of a chance that they're going to stand up in droves and you know, in mass and walk away from this guy. But maybe the direct advertisers, I don't know.
All right, next one up is from, it's an update to Adam's question 2 weeks ago. I noticed, and I know you guys know this about it well, an article came out about Rebel Wilson, and he had asked earlier if any celebrity had won a defamation case against them, and she just won one of the largest suits, I think, in Australia.
$4.5 million
Australian dollars.
Oh, that's like $8.95.
right.
No,
that's a couple boomerangs. She actually won a $3.66 million
American dollar,
in damages against Bauer Media, and Bauer Media is often the target of these lawsuits. They have a huge operation of periodicals where they run sort of more tabloidy type stories. I would characterize them as. They ran some stories where they basically branded her as a serial liar. They apparently they had sources that said that Rebel Wilson was going around town claiming to be a distant relative of Walt Disney, and had sort of concocted and fabricated an entire background to further her career. She said this was all a lie, and it actually hurt her because she was unable to get roles.
And more important than being a lie, she said that Bauer Media was actually personally targeting her. They had an axe to grind with her, and so they knew what they were publishing was false, which under both American and Australian law is a critical linchpin in a defamation case when you're a public figure, and knew that what they were publishing was false and did it anyways. And she went after them hard and got a $4.5 million in Australian dollars judgment, which is the largest judgment in the history of Australian defamation cases.
$4.5 million dues. Can you imagine what she could do with all those dollar dues? So anyway, what was interesting about this case, though, is that one of the arguments under Australian defamation law, I looked this up, was they were trying to prove that the facts, the misstatements that they made were trivial, of a trivial nature that couldn't possibly harm her. This is not a defense that you see all that commonly in American law. It does sort of indirectly get at the damages question, but there's a whole line of cases under Australian law about, sure, we lied about you, but it was about nothing important.
Right.
You lying about being Walt Disney's heir is not a big deal to people, and it didn't prevent you from getting Pitch Perfect too.
Right, but then the finding of the court was that it had, in fact, damaged her reputation, sullied her reputation with the public, and that's all they needed to have a huge judgment.
That was it.
And that is it for Mail Time.
Thanks very much, everybody. We will be back again next week with another very exciting edition of TMZ's Behind the Bar.
See you then.
Thanks for watching. If you want more nerdy deep dives into the legal side of celebrity news, hit our subscribe button right here.
And check out our previous episode over here.